Hi everyone and welcome in my studio. Today with me in front of the camera, which is a rare thing, I guess. So by this time I want to talk about a topic that I do not really want to show so much footage of a painting along, so I'm just in front of the camera and telling you what the topic is. And that is actually a thing that I came across quite often the last days. And this is the misconception that oil painting is more toxic or more difficult than acrylic painting is. You know what? I thought the same for quite a long time. And I had my oil colors lying around for about, I think, 4 years until I really got the confidence in them to grab them and to try them out. Before that, I really was only an acrylic painter if I painted something. So I really like smooth transitions, and this was something I really could not get with the acrylic paint. It always looked a bit rough, or even rougher than I wanted it to look. And so one day I thought, well, why not test it? What can happen? And after all these years of oil painting and testing and trying and error, I think I can tell you some things about it to perhaps make it easier for you to test it yourself. So first of all, as many people think, oil colors are not more toxic than acrylic paint is. Actually, in terms of chemicals, acrylic paints do contain more chemicals than regular oil paint has. In the traditional medium oil paint, this is just an oil, which is a natural oil, like linseed oil, like walnut oil or safflower oil, and the pigment is mixed into it. The pigments are very much the same pigments as they are used in acrylic paints. And the pigment itself can be toxic, that is true. But this is the same with the acrylic paints. But bottom line, oil colors are quite a safe medium to work with, if you of course know the risk. So first of all, the paint itself is made of the oil and the pigment, which is milled together to build a paste, what the paint actually is. It is more or less the same oil base that you can use for cooking. So walnut oil can be used for cooking, linseed oil can be used for cooking. Actually, I have some of them in my fridge, which is just the ones you can get in your grocery store. And yes, oil paints do smell a bit more, but this is some natural thing as well. If you open your bottle of olive oil, for example, you have a smell. If you open a bottle of linseed oil, you will have the smell. And this is actually a smell that you get when the oil is drying. You will also have a smell when you use the acrylic paint, but as the acrylic paint is water soluble, people think this is more healthy and good to use. And yes, there are some toxic pigments, especially if you have some kind of whites. This is a titanium white, which is a non-toxic pigment, but there's also some flake white, which is basically made out of lead, and lead is a toxic heavy metal. So this is something to take care of actually. There are also many colors that contain cadmium, like the cadmium red, cadmium yellow, and cadmium is also a toxic pigment. It is toxic by consumption. So painting with these kind of colors is no problem at all. If you perhaps use a cadmium red, let it dry, use sanding paper, sand it down and inhale the dust. This is something you really do not want to do. If you have, for whatever reason, have to sand down an acrylic paint or an oil paint where you have a cadmium pigment into, and you need to sand it down, use a mask to protect yourself. So even the smell that you have with the oil paints is not toxic. Yes, it does smell. It's something you cannot really avoid. But if you use regular oil paints, you don't really need a ventilation. It is better to have a clean air, of course, but it is not a toxic smell. But, and there is a but to it totally depends on the color that you use. So if you have a regular oil paint, which is just the oil and the pigment, you do not run into any toxic issues in terms of the fumes that come out of it. But there are many kinds of oil colors out there, and there are oil colors out there that have some more ingredients and mediums mixed already into them, and these might be toxic. This is always written on the color itself, this here is not, and the toxicity of the product then comes from the medium which is mixed into it. This might be alkyd, for example, to make them dry faster. Regular oil paint dries between 3, 4, 5, 6 days. This depends on the pigment that is into it. Burnt umber, for example, dries normally way quicker than titanium white does. But there are alkyd oil paints which have a medium mixed into it, which make them dry until the next day. And these fumes coming out of it are toxic, and you need ventilation to not breathe them too much. And you will notice because they already smell very chemical. Something like this, like the alkyd, is liquid, which is a medium that allows you to thin down your paint, and it makes it glossy when it's dry, and it even lets it dry quicker. So having paint mixed with liquid lets it dry until normally the next day. If you have a heavy load of liquid and only a couple of pigments from the oil color, it is drying even quicker. Liquid has quite a smell, and you want to have ventilation when you use it, because it just smells. It doesn't even smell healthy, so you don't want to have ventilation. For example, this is one medium that could be mixed with oil colors. You can, of course, if you do not want to have them dried quicker, if you like to have the ability to move and change color for a very long time, you can thin down your oil color with linseed oil. But I normally tend to go for artist grade ones. This is thickened linseed oil, which is a bit thicker than the regular one that you can get in the grocery stores. This will expand the drying time, so you have more time until the paint settles and gets sticky and dries eventually. There's also a non-thickened version, which even gives you more time. So you can thin down your paint with this one. You can also use paint thinner to thin down your paint, of course. So oil paint does not really work with water, which is logical because water cannot combine with oils, as you know. You can use solvents. This is a mineral spirit, and although this is odorless, so you don't really smell it, it is toxic. So if you use a mineral spirit, you do want to have a ventilation as well, or at least the window open. But when you use the paint thinners, you will thin down the paint, which is the reason why. And it also increases drying time, so the paint itself dries quicker. And the more paint thinner you use and the less oil paint itself, the thinner the coat becomes and the quicker it dries. I've heard the best one comes from Gamblin, and it's called Gamsol, which is an odorless paint thinner, and it's, well, the safest so far that I've come across to. I do not have the one from Gamblin because I cannot get it here, and I need to order it from Jackson's Art from the UK, but I have not yet because I have my Bob Ross paint thinner. Once this is empty and used to the end, I will get the one from Gambar. And of course, besides the paint, you will need brushes. And you will need brushes for acrylic paints and oil paints. So you need to have them, I guess. And these come in different sizes, versions, angles, whatever. So I really do not know the English words for them, and I don't even know the German words for them, and I do not really care because I just grabbed the ones that I like the most. And these are these ones with the rounded head, actually. I really love them to paint with. I also love these really edged ones. And something that I came across quite recently are these liner brushes. For them I know the English word. These are quite small and have a quite long brush itself. So I usually take these for painting hairs, for example. And for very tiny details, these very lovely tiny ones. But these in a way do not work as great for hairs, for example, because they do not hold so much paint. So if you want to do fine hairs with them, you run out of paint right in the middle of your painting. Therefore the liner brush is better because it can hold more of the paint. In another video I will give you some of my brush care tips, how I clean my brushes, how you can store your brushes, what you should not do with your brushes. Yeah, if you like, head over and check it out. And this is for all mediums, so okay. Something else you need to keep in mind when you go for oil painting, which you do not have to face when you do acrylic painting. There is a rule, and this is a quite important one when you go for oil painting. This is fat over lean. So when you do oil painting, you need to make sure that your first layers are the layers with the least oil ratio. So if you use a base layer, for example, to stain your canvas, use more of the paint thinner so that you have less oil on your canvas. Once this is dried, you can add the next layer, and this can, or should have, can have more oil into it. So if you use the oil paint and thin it down with, again, paint thinner or a medium like the liquid, this layer will have more oil into it. And for example, the last layer, take the paint without thinning it much down, so you have the maximum oil layer. If you mix it up and you have a layer of oil paint, which is straight from the tube, for example, and you put another thinner layer over it with paint thinner, for example, you might end up having the paint cracking. And for oil colors, you will have the effect that the colors, once they are dried, look differently than if they are red. Not differently in color itself, but they get a bit matte and dull. And especially for the darker values, like the black or dark reds or all the dark colors, actually, they get a grayish shimmer when they are dried. And this is just normal. So if you have an oil painting and you painted the first layers and you did not have the time to continue on, and you have about 2 weeks or so in between, then the oil painting itself will be dried completely, of course, and you will see the effect that the dark areas are not as dark as they looked when they were red. What you can do to change this effect is, when you go on painting, just use a tiny bit of linseed oil, for example. Take yourself a tissue, put a drop onto it and go over the painting, and this will bring back the colors to life. Just use a very tiny bit of oil color, so at least the least that you can use, perhaps, just to bring back the colors to life. You do not want to have an oily surface to work on any further. This will extend the drying time and the colors will grip differently than it was dry, so just use as little as possible. If you have finished your artwork and it's dried completely, then you will have the same effect, of course. And to prevent this, you can use a varnish. And a varnish has different effects. First of all, it brings back the color to your painting, which is also a very satisfying and awesome thing to do. I love my varnishing days. And it also protects your painting. So whenever your painting is finished and is hanging in someone's home to be enjoyed, dust particles over time sit to it. Or if it's perhaps close to a kitchen, then there is some smoke, grease particles, whatever is flying around in the home. And these more or less collect on the artwork as it does collect on any other surface. And if you have no varnish onto it, you cannot really remove it, and so your artwork in a way gets destroyed over time. If you have varnished your artwork, this varnish can be removed, and with the varnish also all the particles are removed. Your artwork is safe, and once the original varnish layer is removed, you can put another varnish layer over it to protect it again. So this is an awesome thing to do. One of my go-to varnishes is the Gamma gloss from Gamblin again. I do have this one. This one can be applied directly once the paint is dry to the touch. So after 2-3 days, it depends on the color that you have, if you have used any mediums, whatsoever. So whenever you touch your painting and no paint comes off to your finger, you can use this. Just use a soft brush, brush it over, and you will have a final finishing glossy layer which protects your painting and brings back the color, which is awesome. If you go for larger paintings, for example, there's also this spray varnish. I do have this spray varnish from Schminke, which is a German manufacturer, but it smells not good. So if I do use a spray varnish, I do this outside, of course, and I let it dry outside, just to avoid any fumes in my home, which really does not smell good. This one does not smell at all. I still have my windows open because it's still chemicals, but it's odorless, it's cool, it works, it is not sticky once it's dried. I really love it. I really love it. This one comes in different kinds. This is the gloss, there's an ultra gloss, there is a matte one, and I think there is a satin one. I don't know, but I use the gloss one. But the difference for this spray varnish and many other varnishes that I've seen out there, most of them can only be applied after the artwork is completely dried, which says up to 3 or 6 months. Which is not very practical, I think, to have an artwork. If, for example, if you're a commission artist and not doing a commission and you tell your client, yeah, you need to wait 6 months until you can ship it to you. Not a good thing. So I again prefer this one, because this one you can apply after a couple of days and it's good and it's sealed, and yeah, my go-to one. If you have another one that works similar or you have time to wait, choose whatever you want. Just take your time and make a varnish over it, as it really changes the whole thing. I think this is it for the very first video, which explains a bit about the basics, what you need to know about oil colors. Don't be afraid of them. There are many different brands, there are different kinds of oil paints. So there is the student brand, there is the artist brand. The student brand is normally a bit cheaper, but if you can afford the artist brand, go for this one. It has more pigment and it just has abilities that the student brand does not have so much. It just saves you time and trouble actually. So if you can afford it, use the artist grade oil colors, and you do not need a complete set of it. You just need actually 5 basic colors, which is a brown, basically raw umber, a natural yellow, a natural red, natural blue and a white. And you can mix all natural colors that you have in everyday life out there from these 5 colors. And I do have an oil color mixing video already on my channel, so if you want to have a look at it, this in particular was for skin tones, but you can use the very same colors and the very same technique to mix any color that you want. This also of course applies for acrylic paint if you are not into oil paint. Yeah, that's actually it for now. If you have any questions about this video, please leave me in the comments. I will be happy to assist you. I will make another video about the brush care, what I told you before already. And if you're new to my channel, please subscribe. It would mean the world to me. And yeah, I hope to see you in my next videos. Have a great day. Bye bye.